Hi, I'm Hobie1. This is Red Share Reading. Tonight we're reading The Black Book of Secrets by F.E. Higgins. Let's go. We are on chapter 23, fragment from the memoirs of Ludlow Fitch. Sterling's performance in the street was the talk of the villagers for 3 whole days. As far as they were concerned, the Reverend's humiliation was just one more in the eye for Mr. Ratchet, who had watched the entire scene from his window, barely concealed behind the curtain. And another victory for Mr. Zabadow. The battle lines might as well have been drawn in the snow. There was no disputing Pegasus Parvis had given Joe a warm welcome. It could be measured almost from the moment he defied Jeremiah Ratchet. This initial enthusiasm had not waned. Just the opposite. It had increased immensely. Now, at the very sight of him, the villagers behaved as if he were royalty. I swear upon my evil paw that I witnessed more than once some fellow kneeling before him. Poor Joe! He could not go from one end of the street to the other without being stopped a dozen times by well-wishers, inquiring after his health and his business, and even saluki. Joe was always polite. His manner was consistently warm and friendly. But I could tell that the adulation was beginning to trouble him. "I did not come here to be venerated," he mumbled. As I lay during long sleepless nights, the same question turned over in my mind. What did you come here for? I knew by now that things were not and could not be as simple as they appeared. A man arrives out of nowhere in an isolated village and hands over money from a bottomless source for worthless objects and secrets. It didn't make sense to me, but whenever I tried to ask Joe about his past, he refused to engage and immediately talked about something else. I wondered whether Joe's aversion to all the attention was modesty, and I paid little notice to his discomfort. While he tried to avoid the limelight, I bathed in his reflected glory. When I walked the streets of the city, I was nobody. In Pegasus Parvis, I was prince to Joe's king. Of course, Joe was the one they wanted to talk to. His was the hand they wished to shake, but they spoke to me, if only to say good morning. It made me smile. If they had ever seen me in the city, they would have crossed to the other side of the road. Perhaps it was the fact that the village was so isolated that made Joe and me even more special. But special or not, I had a feeling that as long as Jeremiah Ratchet was in Pegasus Parvis, it wasn't going to be enough. Our days were always busy. I had my jobs to do, and Joe had his. But we were never rushed. Being in the shop sometimes felt like being in another world where everything happened at half speed. I never saw Joe make a hurried movement. There was no urgency to his life, but for all that, it was difficult to shake off the feeling that we were waiting for something to happen. In the late afternoon, when it was quiet, and Polly and the Sourdoffs would have been gone, we would both sit by the fire and enjoy the warmth and the comfort it brought. At such times, I couldn't imagine ever returning to the city. "I'm never going back," I said to Joe one night. "Never say never," Joe replied quickly. "All things change." Certainly my fortunes had changed. In my eyes, Joe was the father I had always wished for. I had new clothes that he had given me. As for my rags, we both enjoyed watching them burn on the fire that night. At least once a fortnight, I relaxed in front of the fire in a huge tin tub filled to the brim with hot water, and every day we had 2 decent meals. The Pegasus Parvians had proved most hospitable, and hardly a day passed without some sort of food parcel being left on the doorstep. Rabbits, pigeons, sparrows, a delicacy in these parts, marvelous stuffed with onions and allium, and occasionally a whole chicken from the butcher's. "Bribes," Joe laughed. "They think if they feed me, I will change my mind." He didn't, but he still threw the meat in the pot. As the harsh memories of my previous life faded, my mind started to play strange tricks on me. I began to worry that life was too good. Surely a boy such as I, with my past and the crimes I had committed, deserved punishment, not reward. Joe tried to reassure me. "It's common enough to think like that," he said, "to feel unworthy of good fortune, but have you forgotten what I said to you about luck? You said we make our own luck." "Exactly. You made yours by coming here. Now you work hard, and you deserve what you have." But I never intended to come here, I insisted. It was chance that Ratchet's carriage was outside the nimble finger. But it was you who chose Jeremiah's carriage. What if I had gone down the hill instead of up? I might have worked with Job Wright, shoeing horses. Then you would have taken one of the Sourdough boys when they came up to see the frog. That is a possibility, said Joe, but the Sourdough boys can barely read or write. I can only do that because I went to Mr. Jellicoe. But you sought him out. And so it would go on in circles until one evening Joe asked, "Are you happy here?" "Yes. And if you could go back in time to the city, what would you change?" "I don't know," I said. "If I had done something different, then I might have never met you." "Exactly," said Joe with finality. "Everything that happened to you had or otherwise ultimately brought you here." There the conversation ended because the shop door opened and someone called for service. Joe always woke at the sound of the door, no matter how deeply asleep he seemed, but in case he didn't, Saluki gave a violent belch whenever she heard someone approaching. I felt it was a warning. For a frog, Saluki was good company. When I had the chance, I liked to feed her, to watch her tongue shoot out across the length of the tank, and almost too quick to see, the bug or grub or insect would be gone. I had not taken the lid off the tank again since that first day. Joe had forbidden me to do so, and I didn't want to touch her. Occasionally, he took her out and held her in the palm of his hand. He would stroke her back with such gentleness, and she would burp softly and seem to glow. I hadn't forgotten what he had said about getting her trust, and I hoped that one day I would. I remember those days in the shop well, warm and cozy, away from the cold outside world. But of course, the outside world still came knocking at the door. The villagers were obviously grateful for everything Joe had done for them, and gradually, one by one, they were freeing themselves from Jeremiah's iron grip. But their previous desperation was now replaced by anger, that Jeremiah had treated them so badly for so long, that he had taken so much from them, that he had kept them living in fear, as each managed to pay Jeremiah back the money they owed. They wished to pay him back in other ways, too. One night, we had a visit from the local physician, Dr. Samuel Mulderd. I wasn't surprised. After all, Joe had sought him out the previous day, as he did all his midnight customers, and invited him up. Like most, he had an interesting tale to tell. Samuel Mulderd was a rather morbid man with a permanently gloomy expression on his face. So his patients never knew if they were to live or die. They may have been alarmed to discover that often the doctor did not know either. You see, Mulderd wasn't a doctor at all, just a convincing quack who was on the run from a posse of duped customers who had discovered that his miracle cure was little more than bottled nettles and corked wine. Pegus Parvis was an ideal hiding place for such a man. To be fair, Mulderd was quite harmless. Since coming to the village some 10 years ago, he had practiced medicine on the premise that most illnesses burned themselves out over the course of 7 days. Thus he prescribed his miracle cure, now a more palatable mixture of honey and beer, for a week's duration. And on the whole he achieved quite remarkable results. As for death itself, no one ever questioned the unusually high occurrence of heart attacks in the area. They trusted the doctor and his diagnosis. Samuel Mulderd's greatest fear was that Jeremiah would discover his secret. "I cannot promise that Jeremiah will never find out," Joe had said, "but he did not hear it from us. You have my word." "The man is a monster," he declared. "For years we have suffered at his hands. The villagers want revenge. I know they hope you will help them." "What can I do?" asked Joe quietly. "I am merely a pawnbroker." "That's not what they think," muttered the doctor as he stepped into the street. Joe merely shrugged and handed Dr. Mulderd a purse of coins. "Vincent Key Pasteur," called Joe after him, but he was already out of earshot. I looked at him. Who waits, wins. Oh, if this is interesting to you, please be sure to boop the like button. You'll help the video spread to other people. You'll be helping me out, and thank you very much. I listened to Dr. Mulderd's confession, writing it all down as was my duty, but I was uneasy. I asked Joe again if he didn't think we should do something. "People's lives might be in danger," I said. "Dr. Mulderd doesn't know what he is doing." Joe was adamant. "He's not doing any harm, and there is no one else in the village who would do his job." I protested some more, and Joe had to remind me that we were in the business of keeping secrets. How long do you think we would last if we gave away this information? The business would be in ruins. The business, I thought. What business? We certainly weren't making a profit. Surely the money had to run out eventually. And what would happen then? But I slipped into this way of life so easily that I couldn't bear the thought that it might change. So I kept my doubts to myself, because whether or not I understood what was going on, I was unwilling to do anything that would upset Joe. That's the end of chapter 23. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you again in chapter 24. Bye.